I've really kind of looked at those two projects, and one of the things that emerges for me is that there are similarities. They invited artists through residences and commissions to come and respond to those cities. There was a kind of connection between the local and the international. They had international curators, or in Liverpool's case, researchers, and people on the ground, local curators working with the artists. But I suspect what the difference was is that, in a sense, there was a greater capacity in Istanbul to allow projects to just emerge and to be, in some way, emerge through different kinds of guises, in dialogue with different works and contexts, but to not be about Istanbul. And I think that's probably what begins to emerge, is that I think the curators in Istanbul understood that artists might be coming to the city and making work in response to it, but actually the city might not be represented. The picture of Istanbul might not be there in the final work, whereas I think in Liverpool, the place kept on appearing as a representation in those works. Now, as a curatorial endeavour, I think the other interesting question, and I'll come on to this particular project in Bristol in a minute, but an interesting question is also, do we think that group exhibitions such as biennales is the right place for commissioning? Given that they are sort of international showcases for the most interesting work at any one time, why is commissioning important? And why does place matter within them? After all, if you think back, this is purely subjective choice, but if you think back over the last 5 years, I would say that a number of the most interesting projects, which is Angel projects, this was Jeremy Deller's Battle of Orgreave, which occurred through a number of different ways, as an event, as a book, as a film, as a television programme. Another one would be When Faith Moves Mountains, which was commissioned as part of the biennial in Lima, but then existed as a film and various other occurrences in New York. So I have this question, ongoing question really, as a curator, which is that I wonder whether those kinds of models of group exhibitions are the best place in which to commission work. But that said, I think the challenge to kind of produce a situation in which projects come together and are in dialogue with one another is really hard to resist. And I'll give you an example of how I sort of fell for that myself. This project was called Thinking of the Outside. This was the commissioning project at the end of the 2-year pilot programme that we held. And as it was a 2-year pilot programme, we had to raise all the money on a project-by-project basis. So the opportunity came along to have access to a very large pot of money to which we could then add other funds. And it was to work with the City Council in Bristol, who run the public art commissioning programme, Bristol Legible City. And they wanted someone to come on board and to curate a series of commissions in response to, wait for it, the medieval gates and walls of Bristol, of which there are only one. And there were 19, but there's just one left. So you can imagine I jumped at that one. But I was intrigued because in the past, Bristol Legible City has done some interesting things. It's always been about navigational systems within the city. So they've been responsible for signage and artist commissions in trees and all sorts of things. But I said to them, you know, could we do it as a fairly conventional scattered site exhibition, which would have a more open brief? So the brief actually began with thinking through the city gate as a kind of metaphor for the ways in which the city was kind of policed and bordered. And I started to really open it out as a brief and say, well, perhaps we could think about it in terms of who's on the inside, who's on the outside, how one feels one belongs in a place. I just really want to talk through this project in terms of how it relates to the last 20 minutes of what I've said, rather than talk through who the works were by and all that sort of stuff. as I say, there was a large-scale budget which we then raised of nearly £200,000, and I didn't have a team, so I recruited a whole team to put the project on. There were no gallery spaces. Initially we were going to do this project in conjunction with Arnolfini, but their opening was delayed. So I knew that it was going to occur in the city and it would have to have a particular profile and occur in different locations. So it's a standard kind of project where I invited 6 artists to make new works in Bristol, and that those would be located in a series of buildings or spaces that we would find, refurbish and locate within the city centre. It was open submission initially, and we had about 100 or so submissions, and in the end I selected and invited artists as opposed to taking any of the artists from the open submission process. The reason for that, which I go into great boring detail here, but the reason for that is that this was very much a kind of curatorial vision for this project, and I felt that the nuances between the artists really came out of me having particular artists in mind, as opposed to some of the proposals that were coming through the open submission process. There wasn't a theme, so there weren't artists who had all worked in the same way before, and that was quite interesting to the project, in that I was interested in a mix of generation, a mix of medium, a mix of approach. So for instance, we had an artist who works in a participatory way, we had a painter, we had an artist whose work is very research-based, another artist who works more architecturally, site-specific kind of ways. So a real range of different kinds of approach. But one of the things I was very conscious of for the client, who were Bristol City Council, if you like, or the partner, is that they wanted this project to really enhance an experience of Bristol City Centre. So we decided it would take a very particular route, and this really followed on from the model of Munster or somewhere like that, where the movement from work to work is as much a part of the exhibition as actually seeing the work. So you could walk, starting at the hub, which is in St Nicholas Market, around all of the 5 sites within about an hour. And some years ago, a director said to me that I had to get used to the fact that the experience of a curator was going around biennials in extremely unsafe areas on my own, in the rain, walking upstairs to find a piece of sellotape on the floor that was the work. So I was very conscious of the fact that, you know, if people were walking to find work, that it had to be kind of worth it when you got there. So we didn't have any buses going off to some godforsaken part of Bristol. You know, and it was within a very particular framework for the City Council. So it utilised particular areas of the city, and it followed the path of the original city wall. Now, coming back to the issues of engagement, I was very conscious that one of the things I was quite interested in is how do you introduce an artist into a city, into a place, when you've invited them to make work. Now, one of the artists had lived in Bristol for 11 years and had moved to London. A number of the artists had never been. One of the artists only wanted to make 2 visits to Bristol. She wasn't interested in coming for a long period of time. She wasn't interested in kind of a lot of research. So it had to kind of allow for that diversity of approach. So actually what we began with was a historical work with this guy called John Brett, who is the city archaeologist. And he's not the sort of all singing, all dancing, funky, young archaeologist of the contemporary past that we're now involved with, but he is very dry, and his walks, I think his record was 4 hours with one of the artists. But what it allowed for is that he would do the sort of historical walk around the area, pointing out particular places. And then I would sort of follow on behind, saying, oh yeah, and that's the area where that guy just got shot last week, and you know that. So he would do the sort of, this is how it was in the 9th century, and I would do the sort of contemporary bit.